Hey guys, it's Brandon. Over the first few episodes of this podcast, we're going to have some technical issues. We're having some audio issues, as well as some camera issues. One of my mics ended up breaking, so I had to go buy a brand new one, which is what I'm recording this message on now. So please bear with us as we do our best to adjust some of the audio to make it, listenable. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks for listening.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the very first episode of Strength in Words, a podcast about mental health and the Black experience. I am Brandon, your host.
And I am Payton, also your host or co-host. We host. We host. We here.
All right. So I know this is a brand new podcast. This is going to be the intro episode. So we're going to go ahead and start out by just kind of saying who we are, what we do, why we started this podcast, and what we want out of it, and then leave it open at the end. So let's go ahead and start out. Payton, go ahead. You the one with the papers here.
Facts, yeah. So my name's Payton Hogan. I'm a licensed mental health therapist. Didn't think I was always going to be a licensed mental health therapist, to be honest. I know we was talking a little bit before this, and you was trying to pull some stuff out of me.
Okay, so go ahead and tell the people what you was going to tell me.
Yeah, bro. So, I'm a therapist now, but growing up, I wanted nothing to do with mental health. You know what I mean? Honestly, I just wanted to, sell drugs. I made a lot of, I won't say a lot, but I mean, in my mind, I was making a lot of money selling drugs. You know, I was able to buy stuff that, a lot of my friends had, clothes, shoes, things like that. Couple $1,000 in my pocket at the time. I thought that was a lot.
How old were you when you started selling drugs?
11, 12 years old.
So for a little bit of background, Payton and I grew up together, right? So back in I think we met back in 07.
07, yeah.
I was 17. Payton, you were
13.
13. Okay. So around this time that I met Payton, unbeknownst to me, he lived around the block. He's selling dope in this brand new, and I want you guys to understand. So people who live here in Omaha, out by the Irvington Walmart, there's those houses you see up on the hills. Those are those cherry hills. We were past that, these Hearthstone homes called in the Avalon area. So these are nice, at the time, back in 07, anywhere between $130,000 to $250,000 houses.
Which ain't nothing to play with back then.
Yeah, right. This is right after the housing crisis, a bunch of crazy stuff that was going on back then. But what ends up happening is that, I live on one block, and then I actually live next door to Payton's cousin, Tyler. And then Payton lives around the block. And so as some 13-year-old boy, which, by the way, Payton, he's sitting down now. So if you guys can see the video, Payton doesn't, he look kind of tall. Payton, how tall are you?
It's levels to this. 6'3".
Okay, 6'3". You're 6'3". So at 13 years old, he was also 6'3".
No, he's not lying about that either.
It's something about those Hogans. They got a cousin I also grew up with, surprisingly. Tremaine, yup. Yeah. He actually, fun fact, before I moved into the Hearthstone homes, I lived off of Ames, and I lived around the block from Tremaine, which is Payton's cousin, Tyler's cousin. And Payton also was 13 years old and was 6 foot. He told me he was 13. I didn't believe him that he was 13. Payton, if you're watching this, you know this. I'm gonna say we had to go down to his mom's house. Yeah. We had to go down to Payton's mom's house because he wanted to come over.
You mean Tremaine?
Or Tremaine. I'm sorry.
I'm like, wait.
No. So Tremaine. So we were playing basketball outside the house, and Tremaine wanted to come play basketball with us. We didn't believe. He was like, I said, bro, you grown. He was like, no, I'm 13. I was like, I don't believe you at all. He said, we live right down the block. We went to his mom's house to find out he was 13 years old. So when I see Payton, fast forward a couple years, when I see Payton and find out that he's a Hogan and see that he's 13 years old and he's 6 foot tall.
It's possible.
I was like, okay.
It made sense.
It made perfect sense. I wasn't thrown off in the slightest. So somehow so where are you getting drugs at 13?
Yeah, man. So lots of trauma, man. And I'm not here to be a victim of my trauma, not at all. I used to heavily fall into victimhood when it came to my trauma because I didn't know how to process it. Didn't even understand it was trauma, but lots of trauma, lots of family that was into drugs, lots of family that was into gangs, all of that stuff. And I really didn't have an identity. I didn't feel like I fit in to my family because of trauma. You know, I didn't feel like I really fit into like friend groups because of trauma, but I was always a likable person. And so I could really maneuver any playing field. And I mean, you look at TV, right? BET was big back then. Like, right. And I mean, you see what's the popular thing. And like, as a kid who doesn't fit in and doesn't really know who his identity is because of trauma in the family, trauma with father, trauma with mother, all of that stuff, I look to what I saw on TV. You know what I mean? I look to what I see my family members doing and what I see people around me doing. And I'm like, okay, to be cool, to be tough, to be hard, to be all of these different things, this is what you do. And it's not that far away from me. So, you know, why don't I just like access my resources that are near me to dabble into this lifestyle in this field, which, to be honest with you, I wasn't built for the street lifestyle. Like, I'm too nice. Like, I got a heart. Anytime I fought somebody, anytime I like did something that was like morally, like if you got any sense of moral compass, like, yo, my heart would hurt. Like, I remember, all right, side story from the drugs. I was 18 years old. And my little cousin, there was this dude like calling him, and he was like trying to fight him because the dude thought my cousin was trying to talk to his girl or something like that. And he wasn't. How old are these kids? My cousin at that time was like 15, 16. Okay. And this kid was like 17, 18. He's like, no, you talking to my girl, blah, 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 blah. Right. And he's sitting there arguing with him. I'm like, bro, just leave it alone. He's like, I'm trying to, but he's not listening. So I'm like, look, just give me the phone, man. I'll de-escalate this. It's no problem. I get on the phone. I'm like, yo, I think you got it all wrong, man. Like, he's like, no, F that, da, 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 da. I'm like, bro, chill out. He's like, no, meet me somewhere. I said, say less. So I called up all my homies and we go over to this place. It's right off of 72nd and Blondo. You remember that Baker's on 72nd and Blondo where it was at? So there's like this little park right behind it, and it's probably like 10, 11 o'clock at night at this time.
Oh God.
Yeah. We smoke a little bit before we go out there, and we get out there and they're like hiding in the bushes, and they're like, come up here, we're gonna fight up here, and it's dark. Right. We're like, no, y'all come out here. And so it's this big old white dude. Big white dude. Yeah. And he was like, I'm the one your cousin wanna fight. And I'm like, all right, go fight him. And mind you, my cousin's like wet, dripping wet 155, like God. 5'9". Yes, tiny.
And this dude big, like
he's like 215. Yeah, 215, big.
Oh gosh.
And I'm like, go get him, all right. And he goes over there and he just whops him up, whops this dude.
Wait, the 150?
Yes, my cousin dog walks him. There was no chance for this guy. He's like holding on to his legs. Like my cousin just like nah. And to the point where the dude's like, I'm done. And so then we all like, oh. And then there's this other dude just looking at me across the park. And I'm just like, he's just eyeing me. And I'm like, here we go. So I'm like, what's up, man? And he like, what's up? And he pull up. I'm like, oh, inside.
Easy strap?
No.
He just pull up.
Yeah, he pulled his pants up like he's trying to fight. So then, so he's like, all right, go get him, Payton. I'm like, go get him. I'm like, whatever. So then this dude starts swinging on me. I didn't swing. He's like swinging. I'm just kind of feeling him out. You know what I mean? Like, and then I back up and they're like, Payton, what are you doing? Hit him. And so I take a couple more steps back. And I don't know who bro thought he was. You ever play like Def Jam?
Boy, don't even talk to me about that.
You know how they can run and do like Superman punch? So bro thought he was going to do some Def Jam Superman punch on me. Oh. And he ran. He was like, and I was just like, and he mid punch for him. He's like, slept on his leg. Oh, no. And immediately, bro, I just had this, at first, like my adrenaline and my cortisol, which we're going to talk a little bit about in later episodes. It was just,
what happened?
Oh, my camera stopped.
All right, that's all right. We keep going.
Yeah.
So we'll catch it on.
We'll fix it. Yeah, we'll fix it. But my adrenaline was running, and as soon as I did that, it was like it just all left. It all left, and I just immediately felt bad. Now, like he was sleeping in the most uncomfortable position, bro. Like the most uncomfortable position, and yeah, bro. So even in situations like that, man, I don't have that bone in my body. I don't. Like I tried to, because I felt like I had to have this image. Same thing with selling drugs. Same thing with doing all these things, and it was just me trying to find an identity. But over time, like a series of like situations happened, like me selling drugs all the way up till I was 18, about to turn 19, and then looking at felony charges in college.
Oh, you got picked?
Felony drug charges. Somebody wore a wire on me.
Oh.
Yeah, bro.
What the hell were you pushing?
Oh, it was just weed, man.
Okay. So you wasn't pushing that.
Oh, no, bro. No, I wasn't.
But somebody wore a wire on you?
Somebody wore a wire on me. Yeah, Wayne PD thought I was like a kingpin.
You was at Wayne. Okay.
So for our out-of-state listeners, Wayne, Nebraska is probably got what population of 8.
Bro, not even, bro. It's like 1.5.
So that would make perfect sense.
Shout out to Wayne State. Wayne State College football, Wildcats, and my dogs.
Yeah, between Wayne and Peru, those two places, if you got anything on you, they'll pick you up so fast, and you out here. I see why you was looking. I was like, what the hell are you pushing? Hey, talking felony charges.
Yeah, bro. They hit me with the highest felony drug charge that they could. Gosh. Yeah, distribution of a dangerous substance. They were trying to get me, bro.
Oh man.
And I was just like, fuck. Like my life is about to take a turn. But honestly, like I low key expected it, because a couple months before I got picked up on another drug charge that I fortunately like beat through attorneys and got it like dropped down to just a ticket.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but ever since that, I had like this feeling, because like I had to re-up, I had to start off on the front again, and then like I made my money back, and I just kept on going. It was like 2.5 months later, because I was driving back and forth from Omaha to Wayne like 2 times a week, every 2 days. Every 2 days I would.
So then, how did you get from like, all right, I'm getting picked up. I got picked up looking at felony charges. Like, and you were going to school for criminal justice, right?
Criminal justice at the time, just that. Easiest degree you can get. I promise you. It was like almost every single athlete was like a criminal justice degree. Yeah.
That's funny, because I was going to school for criminal justice. But not for that. Not for only the reason, because I was like, I got to be a cop. And I hear that if I want to be a detective. So if I got a college degree, I got a better chance. So that was what the game plan was. But so then you went from, at that point, you looking at, were you at a scholarship too?
Yeah, I had a scholarship, bro. I got my scholarship taken, kicked out of school, bro. Like, it was a whole bunch, and it was just like I was at a low, bro. I was ready to sit and do my time, man. I remember talking to my mom. She's like, Payton, like, what are you thinking? Like, I'm just like, man, I'll just sit and do my time. The most I'll do is like, I'll do like 3-5 years, get out and figure it out from there.
You were already talking institutionalized.
Yeah, like
like you've been in.
It was just, I just had to prep my mind for it, because like I was ready for it. But I had a public defender, Kate Jorgensen. She realizes it because I told her after the fact, but at that time, she probably didn't even know how much of an impact that she had on my life. She was like, because one day we like looked at the evidence, and they had me, they had my voice, they had it all. They had it all, bro.
And as you can hear, he had a very distinct voice.
Yeah, they knew. They like, we got you. But she was like, look, there's this program, it's called Drug Court. And I think I can get you into it. There's some things that you have to do, but if you get into it, you can get your record cleared. It's 2 years. And when she first told me, I'm just like, 2 years? Like, what all do I got to do? Do the drug test, all that? Yeah, she was like, yeah, there's a lot of drug testing. There's a lot of stuff. And I'm like, Because mind you, bro, I've been smoking weed since I'm 11 years old.
Yeah.
So
it's programmed into your brain.
Yeah. So give that up. I think I'd just do my time. I'd rather do. Don't know what I'm thinking.
He said, I would rather go to prison than give up weed.
Bro, it was real, and we'll get into that later on. Just right. The control that we had on me. But I talked to some people, and my mom had me in front of some people, and I was like, you know what? I'll just give this drug court thing a try. But drug court is intense, bro. Like they literally dictate your life. I was in Norfolk. I couldn't leave Madison County, which is the county Norfolk's in. That's like 2 hours from here. Couldn't leave there. I think I came home here maybe like twice a year for like 1 to 2 day periods.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
How long were you in
drug court?
Yeah.
2 years. 2 years. Yep. Drug testing 4 to 5 times a week. Stand in front of the judge once a week. Like classes like 3-4 hours a day.
Military.
Like it's a lot of stuff. But I learned a lot about myself through that. Also got plugged into a therapist, and this is where mental health for me came in. And my therapist was dope, bro. Dope. Like, she didn't see me as a number. She didn't see me as a stat. She saw me like for my trauma, and she was like, yo, it sounds like you've been through a lot, and I want to focus on that with you. And I had to do it, so I was just like, maybe.
Right.
And at first they weren't passing me through this program. And I was like, okay, maybe I got to talk about some stuff and figure some things out here. And so I was like, let me play this game. And as I played the game, she started like building some affinity with me and getting me to answer some stuff that first I wasn't comfortable with talking about. And like over time, man, I was like, dang, like I had a lot of stuff like pent up that I never actually released. And that was the first time that I was like, yo, there's a lot of people who look like me, who've been through experiences like me, who can relate, that never really got this same opportunity in the same circumstance, same situation. And if they did, it's usually from somebody who they can't relate to, who doesn't understand them. You know what I mean? This is an opportunity for me to like share this with other people. Real quick, little disclosure. I opted out of the first half of the episode. I chose not to have my video there. So if you're wondering why my face was not there, I was just like, I didn't want my face.
Nah, he making it up. We having technical malfunctions, everybody. So we over here getting cleaned up. That's right. First episode, we got a few kinks. All right. So what was the question I asked you? It was, that was what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
What was it that you didn't like? What was holding you back? What was this thing that stopped you from like opening up and talking about these things? Like, why were you so hesitant?
Well, I mean, you got to think about it, right? Like, so trauma works in a lot of ways. And so I experienced trauma at a very young age. And it's nobody's fault. Well, you know, at least I don't blame anybody. Like, life just happens and we learn from it. You know, we realize things and then we just correct it, or we just keep on going with it. They're all choices. And so for me, like, as I'm just experiencing life, experiencing trauma, like with my dad, especially me and my dad didn't have a good relationship growing up. And my dad grew up a certain way, like without his father, that kind of just like created a mindset for him of like how to raise a man and how a man should be.
Right.
And, you know, it did some things to me. I love you, Dad. I do. I truly do. So I'm not trying to bash you, but you got to be transparent. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I like this hard demeanor, like, can we cuss?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, don't be a bitch.
Right.
Like that was the thing.
Mentality.
You know what I mean? No, that was being said. Don't be a bitch.
Oh,
don't be soft. Don't be gay. You like I used to like Radio Disney, bro.
Right.
Radio Disney. Yeah, I love that shit. Aaron Carter, Nick Carter, all that shit. And my dad was like, yo, he used to tell my mom, and he would say it in front of me sometimes, like, he gonna be gay. Don't let him listen to that. And I'm just like, damn.
Right.
You know, and my dad was a hard worker too growing up. He was always at work, worked overnights, did all of that. And so, like, I idolized him, but I think he overworked himself, and he would just carry a lot of anger and resentment, not from just work, but from his own trauma. And
right.
I would see that, you know, and I'm just like, damn, so I'm soft. I'm a bitch. Like, he thinks I'm like gay because I like Radio Disney. Like, it hurt, you know what I mean? And so as I got older and as I'm like trying to find like who I am, you know what I mean, and what I am, it's like, all right, well, I don't want to be soft. I don't want to be a bitch. I don't want to be gay. Like, I want to make my dad proud of me, you know,
right,
inside, but didn't know how. So let me just not do any of these things and let me pick up everything else that
you think he's gonna make you.
Exactly. And so I developed like this pain that turned into anger, this internal hurt that just turned into anger and rage, bro.
Right.
And so like anytime my emotions would like come up that were intense, like when it was like sadness or pain, just automatic anger. And I never wanted to talk about it. I really didn't have the space or the floor to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Because it was just shut the fuck up, like, and get your ass beat. You know how, you know. that shit's not normal anymore. But you know, there was a time where it was normal.
Mom and Dad, I didn't have that. I'm not saying I had that. I just understand. I'm not.
You know, so like, just when it comes to like opening up and talking about that stuff, like, I ain't gonna talk about that. I ain't soft. I ain't a bitch.
Right.
You know, you gotta wear this hard face, but really inside I was like fragile. I was very fragile. Even to this day, bro, I'm okay with it now. Like I am emotionally like sensitive, and I'm fine with that.
I would hope so. You were there.
Yeah, you gotta be. But even now, like, I still catch myself like sometimes going to a state of just like trying not to feel stuff. And I know when I'm doing that, it's like there's really something that I'm not addressing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So talking to a therapist, like, because my mom tried to have me do that when I was young because I was getting in a lot of trouble. I was doing a whole bunch of shit. I would go into my therapist's office and just sit back. He had candy and snacks and shit. And he would try to ask me questions, and I would just give him like bullshit answers and steal his snacks. That was the extent of mental health for me growing up.
He said, either I'm gonna talk about my feelings or I'm gonna go to prison. So I guess this whole feelings thing, since I'm here and all, I might as well.
One of the two, literally. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Literally, like, it changed my life. It showed me a perspective of life that, man, like, I probably never would have got if I didn't go through that experience. You know, so went through it, graduated drug court, flying colors, was working at a social work agency, and working with kids who were in the system, in the juvenile justice system, HHS system. And I was like, man, I like this. I can relate to them. I'm good at this. And this is out in Norfolk. And I won't name the company. But they were good to me. You know, they were good to me. But they would try to work me like a dog. You know, and not try to up my pay and try to have me do a whole bunch of stuff. And so it came a point to where I was just like, all right, like, I can either work like a dog and make this decent level, or I can get another degree and make more money, because that's what the people at my company were doing. They were getting their therapist degrees, and then they would go off and do therapy and make a lot more money. And I'm like, I don't want to go back to Wayne. I'm not trying to put myself back in that place.
He's like, I ain't trying to be on nobody's radar more.
Nah, bro. And it's just too small, you know? So I was like,
well, it was 8 people.
1.5, bro. Don't give them the extra 6.5. So I was like, this is my opportunity to go back home. And I enrolled in school in UNO and did my thing, man. Did my thing, became a therapist, bro, and it's been a journey ever since. Yeah. That's
freaking dope. Yeah, it was a trip. So Payton and I, it's been, I don't know, we ran into each other at the gym once, like 5, 6 years ago. I don't even know if my second kid was born by then.
I don't think so. I think you just had your first kid, just a little bit before that.
So then it's about 8 years ago then.
Yeah.
Gosh. And then I hadn't seen him in obviously like 8 years, and I started my own business this year, and there was a networking event, Rise Omaha, that was hosting an event. So a friend of mine and I went, where my business partner, and I'm looking across the room, and I'm like, yo, I swear down, this dude looked familiar. Like, is that? But I ain't recognize him because he didn't have his dreadlocks anymore. So I'm like, yo, is that Payton? Yeah. And then it was a wrap from there. And so he hit me up and he was like, hey, why don't you come in? Let's try this out. So it's kind of a thing that definitely is something that we're both passionate about.
Facts.
So I guess that's my cue to go ahead and start telling.
Yeah, bro, we want to know about you, man. You done had me tell my whole life story. Government name out there, like, what's up?
So my upbringing is a little different than yours. I got sick at a really young age. I got sick at 12.
Okay.
I had ADD when I was a kid. And so, you know, probably, but I had like actual ADD, not like overprescribed kid who's too, I actually had attention deficit. I didn't have the HD part, but I definitely had the attention deficit. I could not finish homework, could not do these things, just struggled concentrating the whole nine, up till 12 o'clock at night doing homework, that kind of thing. And so I got tested and they're like, oh, he's got ADD. Well, let's give him some meds. So they gave me some meds and worked great. Freaking got through 6th grade, got through 7th grade, smooth. And come 13, and I got this, the medicine I was on, it really wasn't cutting it anymore. And they're like, well, we have 2 options. Either we can up it to the max, or we can just switch over and try Adderall. We're like, all right, let's try the Adderall. I mean, I was like, I don't know how well this is going to work if we just up it, so let's just switch the Adderall and go from there. So what happened was that I started getting sick. I started like getting like a cold of some kind afterwards. We found out later it was a side effect of the Adderall. We didn't know that. And so I took some Tylenol cold. And this is around October. So it's like, I think we had gone to the pumpkin patch at some point nearby. And shout out to Vallis Pumpkin Patch.
Hey, Vallis is dope.
And my mom called the pharmacy and was like, can he take this medicine with the pseudoephedrine or with the Tylenol cold? And they're like, yeah, it should be fine. And I did. And then out of nowhere, I couldn't walk. Like my legs stopped working. Like I could move them, but I couldn't walk.
Hold on. How old were you?
13.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah.
13 years old.
I went to get up. I was downstairs talking to my mom. I went to get up and I fell. And I was like, what the? And my mom thought I was playing. And she was like, I should get up. I'm like, I can't.
Sheesh.
And so we were like, what the hell is this? So they took me to Children's and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. They're like, they at the end of it, I was there for, I don't know, I'm going to say about a week. I can't remember. I was 13. But at the end of me being there, they're like, I think it's something in his head. I think it's something neurological. So I get home. I got all this homework now. And I'm doing homework. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table. And all of a sudden, I can feel something going on in my head. It felt like it was just like, I don't know how to describe. It's not static. But imagine like a sonic screech. But it's dull. And it's not that high-pitched squeal. But it's something. And I just started screaming at the top of my lungs. And I fell to the floor and I'm screaming. I went to a full psychosis.
Oh, dang.
So what ended up happening is that they ended up taking me over to Emmanuel. And they're trying to get me so Emmanuel has a 4th floor.
Yeah.
And if anybody's ever been to the 4th floor, if anybody's ever known anybody who's gone to the 4th floor, it is usually for the kids who have behavioral issues or is problematic.
I was on the 4th floor. I was that behavioral kid.
Case in point. And so, but I wasn't one of those kids. And so they're trying to the staff is kind of trying to poke and prod me, trying to get me to act up, I guess. Because they thought that's what I was doing. They thought that I was lashing out or acting out because of, but no, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And so it was rough. And I was up there for 10 days. It was one of the worst 10 days of my life as a kid.
They got good food.
No, they don't.
Bro, you get all the snacks.
No. So when I was up there, keep in mind, it's 2003.
Okay. Yes.
So 2003 had some different stuff going on.
I forgot you.
And this was prison. Yeah. This was child prison at the time. You had to ask to do everything. You had scheduled times you could play, scheduled times you could talk, scheduled times you had to go to bed, scheduled times you had to ask to go to the bathroom. Could not get up during that.
Look, the couple times I went there, look, y'all, he's telling his experience of this, but I just want to give you I want to give y'all the dull, brighter side of these things. When I went there, they had all the cheesy crackers, peanut butters. They had TV that you could turn on whenever. Actually, from me going there, it was like a getaway, kind of.
Hell no.
It was low key like a getaway. Anyways, continue.
Hell no, it wasn't like that at all. I had wardens. They was up in there talking about where you going. I was like, I just need to go to the. Nah, you need to ask to go to somewhere. They was up in there trying to give me shots. I was they're like, yeah, he need a flu shot. I said, no, I don't. I don't need a flu shot. So, but the coincidence was that when I was up there was a kid who literally had the exact same thing happen to him. And so and my mom found out by talking to his mom. And they just so happened to be talking, and it was the exact same thing. He had ADD, he got on Adderall, and he had a whole psychotic episode. He didn't have the old thing where he wasn't he couldn't walk. He just couldn't there was something going on. He had a whole psychotic break. So 10 days later, I get out, and we don't know what's going on. Like, it's an on and off thing. My legs work, and then slowly I began to develop other issues. I began to develop a speech impediment. My speech was slowed and slurred. I was just kind of like in a stupor. Like, if you've ever seen somebody who just kind of, hopefully everybody can hear all this, my mic is acting funny, but if you ever seen somebody who could just sit there and just...
Oh, dang. It was like that?
It was like that. I couldn't do anything. My brain wasn't working. It was like fried and staticky. Like, it was nothing. And it was like this for months. And then slowly I got better, and slowly everything was fine, and whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. They put me on different pills or whatever, but they didn't do anything. Because I wasn't having these issues that they thought I was having. They didn't understand what was going on. So fast forward 2 years later, I'm obviously still having episodes, and it got worse in the wintertime. Whatever was going on, I would get sicker in the winter. During the summer, I was fine. Wasn't nothing happening. Wintertime, come November or October, I would get sick. Slowly everything would start shutting back down, all that stuff again. And so we went through testing. And I have a neurologist, Dr. Richard Andrews, and he worked on my mom, who she had these non-epileptic seizures, and she'd had them since I was like, I don't know, 5 or something. He was like, all right, so he had an idea. He was like, all right, I've got this. I'm gonna take a shot. And so I go through. I don't know if I went back to Children's, and he put me through a series of tests. And what took them like 15, 16 years to figure out what's wrong with my mom, it took them 2. From the time I was 13 to 15, they're like, you got the same non-epileptic seizures your mom does. They just show themselves differently. And so this is 2005. So that's the game we play. That's the game I play for the next 10 years, right? Is I have this disorder that during the wintertime, it gets bad. Things can happen. Paralysis. I could just lay in the ground and not move for hours. I had to wait for my body to say, okay, you can move again. And so we're going, it's as I get older, I don't know, probably about 2013, 23 or whatever, I've gotten married and things like that. And my mom was doing research one day on YouTube, and she said, I need you to watch this video. And I was like, all right, watch the video. I said, well, what is it? She said, just watch it. It has to do with your disorder. And she said, I'm like, okay. And it's this thing called conversion disorder. And I watched this woman begin to describe her conversion disorder, and she records herself having an episode, and I break down. I just start bawling my eyes out because I was like, it was so, I couldn't describe how I felt. It was like, it was relieving to see. It was like, it was refreshing to see, but it was also so scary because it was like, that's me. That's me right there. And so I had a name. It was no longer just non-epileptic seizures. I had a name to what was wrong with me. And nobody for years, because conversion disorder has now come so far, then it is like a secondary thing that the neurologist will pick. So it was something that was so otherworldly to experience. And I say that it's come so far is because there was an episode I had that looked like a stroke. It looked like I had had a stroke.
Parts of your brain shut down?
Parts of my brain shut down. Now, this is a little later. This is a couple years later. Is when I was, because I'll backtrack a little bit. So when I was 25, I think I want to say I was 25. And we're back. So yeah, back when I was 25, my mom has had a stroke at this point, right? I've done I was a foster parent for a while. We had a kid go home. My wife at the time, she had a bad episode, which we find out later, and we'll talk about that later. She had postpartum. And so she had told herself or convinced herself that our daughter and our foster daughter, who were only 7 weeks apart, that was her child. And so when the baby went home, she went into a high depression. So there was just that whole issue. And then my mom had a stroke. And so I came back home. I don't know what the heck. I guess we're going to see it. Whatever. There's gonna be audio issues in this.
It's the first episode, y'all. Give us grace.
Yeah, this is gonna be I'm gonna let y'all know that this is gonna be the first episode, and we're having some audio issues. Just know that it'll be fixed. It'll be fixed by the second episode. So my mom's had a stroke. We moved back home. I moved back in. There's the house that they were renting out had a whole like upstairs apartment. So my wife at the time, me and my baby, we all moved back home. And my kid's like, I don't know, 1.5, 2. And my mom was also taking care of my great grandma at the time that she had this stroke. So I come home to take care of everybody. And so what's happening is that my mom's going through this spiritual awakening, and she said that God healed her from this stroke, that one day she couldn't do anything, and she prayed and believed and so on. And the next day, half of the ailments she had were gone. Like overnight. So you believe what you believe out there, but that was what my mom experienced. And so she was like, I need you to pray. I need you to actually pray. I know you've prayed before, but I want you to pray a little differently. And I was like, whatever, Ma, I'll do it. I did it, and I was like, all right, done, cool. And so one day I'm laying on the couch, and I feel something. I'm like, my eyes, I'm like going to sleep or whatever. But something happens, and my body begins to buzz. Like my eyes start fluttering, and my body begins to buzz. And I've never experienced anything like this to this day. I don't know what happened. I don't know what, like I couldn't tell you logically or scientifically what happened to me. But my body buzzed, and my eyes start fluttering. And I was like, and then like I woke up, I sat up and was like, what the hell done happened? I was like, oh, I called my mom. I was like, yo, like, do I need to be worried? Like, yo, I just had this
Paranormal.
I had some stuff pop off. So I was like, like, I ain't about this. So I go to sleep. You know, everything's fine. I take care of the kids that day, yada, yada. I go to sleep. And the next day, I wake up and I sound like my throat is scratchy. And all of a sudden, I go this accent, and I'm like, oh shit! I kid you not, and I'm like, yo, son, something feels weird. It wasn't just the accent; something was off. Like I didn't feel normal. Now, things that could cause me to have an episode were, and then my condition gotten worse as I got older. Like I could not do my dishes without all of a sudden my body shutting down. Okay. Like I was in bad shape. Couldn't lift anything heavy. Yeah, would cause an episode. And like in an episode, that means like my thought process, it was slow down. It was harder to think, harder to speak, all of that. It looked like I was having a stroke. Mm-hmm. That's what it looked like. And so I was like, well, you know, by doing anything really, short of me sitting down and not doing much, that's how it went. And I knew something was off. So I woke up, I'm like, what the hell's going on? Something's happening to me. So I go downstairs and I'm like, do you hear me? And my people, now mind you, I'm doing as much as I can to sound like it. It sounded like Jason Statham, but like if I've been chewing on like gravel. See? And so my mom was like, she said, well, okay, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, I'm stuck like this. And she's like, Tommy, come here. Tommy's my dad. And she's like, talk. I said, I woke up and I sound like this. And my dad goes, why are you playing? I said, oh, no playing. And he was like, no. And something in my back of my head says, go lift the weights. My parents had like a little gym in the next room over. And I get on the little bench press thing, and I 80 pounds. I'm like, nothing. I would have had an episode like that. My brain would have immediately started to shut down. 80 pounds, I could barely lift 30 or 50 without having an episode. I pushed 80 pounds, nothing. I go, 120 pounds, nothing. Nothing's wrong with me. Nothing's happening. I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for a trickle, a fuzz, something. Nothing. And I'm like, Mom, I think I was healed. And so, of course, now we're digging, because I have this accent and my body's not responding the way it normally has been for the last, I think, 12 years. So I'm like, so of course I call my squad, right? We all get on, we all on PlayStation together. But I've known these cats for like the last 5-10 years. Or at that time it was like 9 years, something like that. And one of them's a doctor, and the rest of them are just a bunch of hoodlums.
One of them is the other one.
One is like, so I get on the mic, and I'm like, all right, I need everyone's help. I'm like, Brandon, why you got this accent? Because I used to goof around all the time. I used to take calls for First Data for the UK. So I'd be like, hey, how you doing today? We used to be playing around, right? But this one, you could tell it was different. You could tell it was real different. I said, I woke up like this. And everybody starts getting in the chat. Everybody starts getting in, and they're like, yo, what the fuck is Brandon doing? And I explained to them what happened. And they're like, bull. So we all look it up. And we find out an umbrella underneath my conversion disorder is foreign accent syndrome. Where, and for those who don't know what foreign accent syndrome is that usually people who have gone under anesthesia or suffered some form of head trauma can wake up with an accent that they've never had a day in their life. I think an English woman woke up with a Chinese accent, a Texas woman woke up with a British accent, and things like that. And so that was me. I woke up with an English accent, and and it stayed like this for a couple months. I had an English accent for a couple months, and then one day it just disappeared. But I never got sick again. I didn't get sick anymore after that. And so I'm like, well, how's this working? So we went to my neurologist, of course, and he explains it that my brain, how I got sick or what happened was that if my brain was under stress of any kind, both physical or mental. Hold on, we got sirens coming through. Wait for it. Oh, they might be down here.
No, they're going away. They're going north.
Okay. So what would happen is that if I was under any kind of stress, both mental or physical, it would cause an episode. That's just what my brain's stress response was. And so for whatever reason, it now changed. It rerouted itself to the accent. And so I was fine for like a year. And then I had an episode that looked like a stroke. And it looked bad. Like I woke up and couldn't move the whole left side of my body. And I went to the hospital. They found out I didn't have a stroke. And I was like, well, it's either I had a TIA, and this is what I'm thinking. I had a TIA, which is a minor stroke, or it's an episode of my conversion disorder. Well, fun fact, to now bring back why I said conversion disorder had come so far, it had become where this neurologist came into the ER to talk to me, and he says, well, one of two things have happened. Either you've had a TIA, which is a minor stroke. I knew this, and he didn't. He didn't know I knew that. He said, or you have conversion disorder. That was his second option. 12 years of medicine, it went from something that no one has ever heard of and didn't even have a name to their second option.
Nah.
So I was like, all right, cool. Well, I know I didn't have. It's like, well, either one you can't do anything about. If it's TIA, then you just have to wait for it to get fixed. And then if it was a conversion episode, then I knew how to do that. But the problem was, this was a bad episode. This was really bad. Like, my system did not work for like a month. It took me 30 days to be able to function normally.
Okay.
It took me 90 days to get back to normal. Now, in this time, a little bit before that, I didn't have an episode. I just had my accent kick in. I was right after my kid was born. Like, I started a job over at Cox, and like second month in, I got my accent, and I had to explain that to them, and then it dropped down to a whisper. Now, I don't know how to whisper. You made this a family joke where Brandon's voice, he doesn't have the capability of whispering, right? So, but when I tell you that I could not go above like that, it was a condition of my conversion disorder. But that was it. I was only having vocal issues at that time. So a little bit later, like a year later, I had an episode that looked like a stroke, and it was one of the scariest things that I had ever experienced for any of my ailments at all. So what we ended up doing was, now for years I learned to try to live as stress-free as possible, because I knew that was going to trigger my episodes. I knew that was going to cause an issue if I had stress on me. So I tried to live as stress-free as possible. Well, like I said, my wife at the time, my kid's mom, she had postpartum, and we were having marital issues. Like there was problems. Like there was, which that stress from that eventually built up to that episode, that high-end like stroke-like episode. And so didn't know that at the time, and we didn't know that she had postpartum until a little while later. I was making jokes online and was like, "Wife hates me after having kids," and then all of a sudden you get all these dads in a forum popping up talking about what happened. I was like, "Yo, these dudes is going through the same stuff I'm going through."
You'll be surprised how many women actually experience postpartum undiagnosed, and most of us men just think they crazy.
Big facts, yo. That was my whole thing. I was like, yo, she freaking crazy, son.
Crazy. Their hormones are really just thrown off. Chemical imbalances, neurotransmitters are not firing the same way.
Stuff gets freaking fried. Like, you know, with a stroke, how stuff gets fried up in a stroke, depending on your postpartum, it's like that. And she had postpartum depression, postpartum bipolar, and she had a little bit of postpartum psychosis.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. We didn't know that until later. Like, she had, like, if there's like 7 for each one, 2 of those she hit like 6 out of the 7, and 1 of those she hit like 4 out of 7.
So she was going through it.
Yes. So we got her some meds. We got meds on there, but it still wasn't working. Right? It took an edge off. So then we were still having marital issues for a long time, and this stress was, I would have an episode once a year. At this point, it was like a tank, and this is how I ended up explaining it. Was I had this tank that would fill up, and it would take about a year to fill up, and then I would have an episode, and then the tank would go away, would start all the way over, and then I'd do it again. And so later down the line, I was going under so much stress. I was still having a lot of problems. My mom was like, "You need to talk to somebody." I was like, "Why, Ma? They're not going to tell me nothing different. I can't do squat about nothing." And she's like, just do it. So I was like, fine, I'll go ahead and do it. And I went through my job, they had some mental health check-in thing. So I went and talked to the therapist or whatever. And I told him what had been going on in my marriage. And he goes, "Honestly, it sounds like she has a dissociative disorder." Mm-hmm. He said, "There's nothing you can do about it. So you actually need to get her evaluated." And I was like, this dude's a quack. He don't know what the hell he's talking about. But I was like, but we'll get her evaluated. Like, I'll go ahead and play with that. And we'll go with that idea. And so we do that. I talk to her. She gets evaluated. We do the whole process of that, and we find out that she's got bipolar. And I was like, all right, well, that makes sense. So then we start that, and they told her to start therapy. Well, our therapist is like, actually, I think there's a little bit more than the bipolar. She said, because you've answered these questions a certain way. And so we're like, what the hell does that mean? Come to find out, she has borderline personality disorder. Now, this level of stress, my marriage was turmoil. Like, it was constant. It was almost as if I was order, she was chaos, right? And this level of stress it was so much stress. And anybody who's ever known someone who's borderline or has ever been in a relationship with someone who's borderline, you can have an idea of what that's like.
Not fun.
It's not fun. A very, very quick synopsis of it. It's someone who's borderline is someone who, they're sicker than somebody who is neurotic, but not as sick as someone who is psychotic. They glorify you and put you on this pedestal 1 minute, and at the drop of a dime, they can feel crossed and they'll hate you. And so you can imagine where 1 minute there's some semblance of love and affection, and then the next I'm being told hurtful and hateful things. And so this was causing just so much heavy stress in my life. And my episodes were starting to become a bit more touchy, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And so what ended up actually happening for me was that I ended up working at a company. I won't name them because I didn't really care for how they was doing some stuff. But what really got me to want to help, I was like, all right, there's something. And I needed a new job. And it just so happened that I somehow got the time wrong for a freaking interview over at the metro station. And they were like, oh, well, guess some things weren't meant to happen. And I'm like, I freaking guess, chick, whatever. And there was another company that said like, hey, can you come in for this interview? And what it was is that essentially it was a rehab facility for people who had drug addiction and alcohol addiction. And I was like, all right, well, what's the job? And they're like, basically you're a glorified babysitter. That's how they...
Hey, hold up. Basically, you're a glorified babysitter. No, legitimately, like on certain levels at any inpatient facility, like you literally are tending to... A therapist gotta have a sense of humor too. Not literally like you're helping people, but
no. I was the job title is essentially a glorified babysitter. My job was to keep an eye on these cats, make sure they didn't do nothing they wasn't supposed to, make sure they wasn't trying to do, hustle somebody out, and then document what they did for the day.
Facts.
That was what the job on paper was, but that's not what that job was. I found out that you basically become these people's teacher, their confidant, their somewhat friend, because you ain't really friends with them. You make sure you create that separation, but you're not coming to dinner. You're not coming to dinner. Like our friendship stay here, and that's it. Ain't going nowhere else. But you have to stay hard on them. You have to make sure. And so 90% of the people who came through those doors, they were convicts. 90% of them. They did not have, like, the youngest cat in there that came through was that I saw. There was somebody who was 19, but the second one that really that I developed a bond with, he was 24 years old, and he was looking at 30 years in prison.
Jeez.
Messing around, he was pushing drugs, getting cops on chases and things like that. But all of them, there was very, very few that were not. There was 2 of them that was there, I think voluntarily, that had no criminal charges that I had seen the whole time. And I went, at one point there was 20, at another point there was 8, another point there was 20. So there was a bunch of people who came through those doors, and a lot of them, they needed help. And so I sat alongside these therapists for almost a year working with them. And I learned so much just passively. Now, the guy who hired me, his name was Tim. And Tim hires me, and he's like, all right, cool. Well, I want you running these groups. And I'm like, huh? What you mean groups? I don't run groups. It's
above my pay grade.
That's above my pay grade. I'm getting paid $13 an hour. What are we talking about here? And he was like, I want you to run these groups. I want you to run diversity group and relapse prevention. I'm like, huh? I don't know nothing about no relapse. Tim, I don't know if you know this about me, but I don't smoke rocks. I don't know. I ain't ever did drugs, and I don't like alcohol. So I ain't smoked nothing. I ain't ever done nothing. Like, I ain't got, like, how am I going to teach these guys and prevent them from doing some stuff? I have no idea. And these cats was tough. Like, they could see through bull because they were certified hustlers, right? You could not out hustle these cats. So I'm like, bruh, they gonna think they gonna eat me alive. I said, I don't know nothing. He's like, nah, you got it. And I'm like, Tim had to see something in me within the first couple weeks there that I didn't know nothing about. Tim had to see something because he had me running these groups, and I'm throwing bull crap out the window. Like, I'm just pulling stuff out of my hat that I think might work. And lo and behold, it was. I began to teach these people about relapse prevention, and what it was that I began to use tools that I used in my own life of how to handle stress, how to rechannel some of these things. Like, yeah, I didn't have an addiction that was driving me to go do something, but I had a disorder that I had to manage, and I lived in a hectic household where my spouse had a mental disorder, and it was nothing but chaos. So that mental disorder was a complete trigger for mine. And so I had to figure out how to work around that and live through that while also helping her and helping them. And the tools that I learned there, I was able to take home to help her or to try to help her at least. And the tools that I used with her and why basically I got the feedback of, I was able to try to use back with them. And so it was kind of this back and forth of really learning and teaching. And the thing, what ended up happening was, and something that you brought up earlier, was that to those guys, there was the therapist there. There were a bunch of white women who didn't know nothing about nothing. And I say that, but there was white folks who was literally saying, these bunch of white women that don't know nothing about nothing. Yeah. Like, they didn't know their life. They didn't know their struggle. They didn't know what it was for them to go through those things. They didn't know black mentality or black or hood culture. And that's the thing, right? It was the fact that you either had black men in there who didn't understand, or that they felt that they were misrepresented or misheard or not listened to by these white women. And then you had everybody, black, white, Latino, whatever, in hood culture, that's how they saw it. These white women don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what it's like. And so for me, and this is out their mouth, they're like, even though you've never done drugs, you've never had an addiction, you somehow have a way of speaking to us that they don't. So what ended up happening though with that is that on my last day, I got to hear from, they have their goodbye, right? And all these guys in there, these are stone, and like I said, these guys are stone cold killers. Like, they used to smoke dudes at the street light. Like, literally. Yeah. Dude who's looking at them wrong, they blasted them right there. And a lot of them had weight, a lot of them could call somebody at the drop of a dime, and somebody's gone the next day, that night. And these guys they talk to me and they say some stuff to me that the overall message is that you come from a complete different walk of life, a walk of life that we can only dream of. And you somehow have done more impact on me in my time here, in my life, than anyone else has. And I'm sitting over here like, y'all ain't about to have me up in here crying. Y'all ain't about to go over here. And Tim, and I never forget this, Tim tells me, he says, you have been the best hire I've ever had. And I know you're going off to do better things, but I wish I could keep you because I know what potential you have to help so many more people. And I was like, Tim, I just told these people I ain't about to be up in here crying. You trying to get me.
Side note, Tim was lying. He went and worked at McDonald's. I'm just playing. But no, that's dope, bro.
It really hit me. So fast forwarding to a couple years ago, I was making this series on YouTube and Instagram and whatever called The Ghetto Synopsis of the Bible, right? I had already read the Bible like once or twice over, but I could not tell you where to find anything in that book. You get asked me that. You get people who go to church and they're like, you go see in John 5. That was not me. I knew the stories, couldn't tell you where to find it. Yeah. And so I used to have this bit where I'm in the house and I'm telling people, about the Bible. We're having a discussion or whatever. I'm like, nah, fam. That was like when Moses sat up in there and was like, hey, yo, Ramses, I need you to go ahead and let my people go or God's coming through. And Ramses said, bet, do it. Like, I ain't letting nobody go. So I was doing that. And everybody around me was like, yo, you need to start putting this out. Like, this is hilarious. And so I did it for a little bit. And I would make a few episodes. But, I got busy with life. Stuff started happening and so on. And one day, my grandpa found it. Now, my grandpa is this, like, I bet top dollar, you was on Sunday switching to Channel 12. And you would see this tall, skinny black man, bald-headed with glasses, talking on that doggone screen. And that was my grandfather. He was a man of the church. He was everywhere, every which way possible of the church. And so I find out that he calls me. And I missed this call. And my mom's like, what your grandpa want? I was like, oh. She's like, I wonder if he found one of your videos. I was like, nah, grandpa don't know how to work the internet. He don't know what's going on. And I call him back. He goes, grandson. That's how he talked. I saw one of your videos. And now a bead of sweat has dropped over my eye. I'm like, oh no. "Oh no, you've seen it." I was like, "Oh, yeah, you saw it? Well, what did you think?" He goes, "How did you come up with this?" I'm like, "Huh?" He said, "These are amazing." And it hit me like a freaking wave. I was like, what you mean these are amazing? He said, "How did you come up with this? Like, how did you come up with this whole thing?" And so I kind of just told him. I said, I'd already been to the Bible a few times, blah, blah, blah. Decided to make a few, I had a few friends and family who were like, "Yo, I want to see this from the beginning to the end." And he was like, he said, I've been, in church a long time or whatever, but basically he says, this is one of the, he said, you have a potential, you have a way to speak. You have a way to talk to people. You have a way to speak to people. He said, and this you have is a way to reach people who would never normally listen to the Bible. I said, well, that's kind of what my goal is that if somebody comes across it and, I tell this comedic way about the Bible and that's something that they're interested in, then that's awesome. Then they can, pick it up for themselves. Like, don't just take my word for it. And he says, he says, you have the only critique I have is that just make sure you get the names right. I said, because I was sitting over here talking about, I don't know, like Ram, Shaq, Meshach, Abednego, One Piece, Monkey D. Luffy. Like, I'm just saying names at this point because they had somebody had 800 kids.
Facts.
And so he was like, just get the names right. That's it. He goes, other than that, he said, you have a gift to speak to people and you have a potential to help so many people in your life. And I was like, that's dope. It was so, I didn't know. I thought he was going to sit there and be like, man, what the heck you doing?
He knows this low key is a plug for him starting back up this this podcast. Stay tuned. It actually sounds really interesting. So I'm excited to hear that.
Well, I was like, I'll have to play. I'll show you guys an episode. But this ain't a plug for nothing. This ain't a plug for nothing. But 2 weeks later, he died. Unexpectedly, he died, and I had to go. My dad went down there and they saw his body and he got in, but he had an aneurysm in the stomach, or at least that's what we think happened. My grandma found him at the bottom of the steps of the pool of blood, and so I think the next day I went over there because I was like, Dad doesn't need to go down there and Grandma can't clean up that blood. She's not gonna be able to do it. So I went over there and I cleaned up the blood. So I had to shut my brain off. That was one of the most stressful things I had dealt with. I had already had to deal with my great grandma dying. I listened to her last heartbeats. She was in the bed. I'm like, yo, you need to go to the hospital? She's like, she shakes her head no. And then she dies right there in front of me. So that was already my traumatic experience. That kept me up. And so I moved to this one and I had to shut my brain off and I had to clean up all this blood. And all I could think about was, Grandma can't come down here. Grandma can't come down here. She cannot see this. I have to get through this. She cannot see this. She can't deal with it. And so what played in my head every day since, almost every single day, was the last conversation I had with my grandfather, where he tells me I have this gift to help so many people. And so I knew that then I'm not somebody who thinks I got this gift. I'm just a cat who just talks and says a bunch of nonsense, right? But I've been told by almost everybody I know that I've helped them in some way just by talking to them. And so this all now boils down to rounding out this podcast, right? This episode where Payton hits me up and he says, I want to start a podcast with you. And I said, bet. And he's like, well, wait a minute. You ain't.
No questions asked.
You ain't gonna ask me nothing? I said, no. Because the fact is that I already know what you do. I already knew what you were about. I knew what you wanted. We had the same goal in mind. I've been talking to people for years about finding a way to talk to young men, young black men, my community, my brothers and sisters, about finding a way to teach them how to deal with things that have happened to them in their life. Finding a way to talk to them about a way that has deal with the trauma in their life. The fact is that we in the black community and communities of color in general, Latinos, Asians, etc., nobody believes in mental health, right? That's not a real thing. What you get told, quit being a bitch. Don't be a bitch. Don't be gay. Those are white people problems. What you depressed for? You ain't got nothing to be depressed about.
Go wash them dishes.
Go wash them dishes. I'll give you something to be depressed about. Now, I was privileged enough to not have to deal with that growing up. I was able to openly talk in my house, not being disrespectful, because you gonna get some hands on you. You start doing that, but I was able to talk about my feelings. I was able to convey these things without any issues, and so. But I knew others who couldn't do that. I grew up around people who they didn't talk about their feelings, right? And I grew up listening. And when I worked with these people, I listened to them talk about all their horror stories. I listened to them talk about where you gotta wipe my nose right with it. I listened to a man talk about how his mom shot him up with heroin in his feet for the first time when he was 10 years old. I heard a woman talk about when she was 11, her mom sold her for drugs to a man. I heard a woman talk about how she had to help her husband dispose of a body, and she couldn't leave this man. And how he kept her around was he kept her on drugs. He kept her hooked. I listened to all these people tell their traumatic horror stories that I didn't even think, I would never have imagined were real. And I watched them rather go to prison, rather spend 5, 10, 15, 30 years in prison than ever talk about the trauma that they went through. And I know that there's so many that are like that are out there who didn't have to deal with drugs or alcohol, right? This is just the extreme. I know others who would rather be in a gang than deal with something. I know others who they hold weight and have this disdain towards black men, black women, people in general, cops, anybody, authority. There's so much weight that they hold towards these people. There's so much disdain that for the last 20 years, we've been doing the same thing. Last 20 years, I've been sitting, I was from 12 years old, I'm 32 now. And I still see the same kids doing the same stuff. Glorifying, gang culture, drugs, weed, pills. And I don't want to see us going in this same loop, right? Once upon a time, I think the black community was up. We was moving somewhere. Then the crack epidemic took place, right? They was throwing away our men, putting them in prison. They were going in and we had our own community. We start turning against one another. Look at Detroit back in the 60s?
60s, 70s, 80s, shut their jobs down.
They turned in on themselves. They rioted and looted.
There was a day I was talking to a man from Detroit. There was a day he told me where over 100,000 people lost their job one day. One day. Job gone, laid off. A whole neighborhood abandoned, boarded up because they couldn't afford their houses anymore. And what does that do? Like, when you think about like just like what that visually will, seeing that, what that'll do to a person.
I want you to think about your neighborhood right now. I want you to think about where you are where you live right now. Whether it's an apartment, a trailer, a house, whatever. I want you to think about a 3-block radius. Gone. Nobody lives there anymore. Gone. Where are they going? Now, I'm not blaming white America. I'm not going to blame the man. I'm not blaming white America. But for black people's problems, but it's the fact that we've been programmed for so many years to think a certain way, to behave a certain way. And they keep, and I say they, meaning the media, whoever runs the world itself, they keep our young men dumb. How many black people y'all know who ever told you, yo, what the fuck you reading for?
Literally.
Yo, are you gay? You read? Or you think you educated? Why do you talk white? Why you act white? There was
a very profound philosopher. He had a line, and it rings true to this day. He said, "They taught us how to hate ourselves and love their wealth. So now shawty asking where the ball is at." That's Kanye West.
I was like, what philosopher? So this comes down to what our goal is for this podcast, right? Payton and I come from two different walks of life, completely different. I dealt with stress and dealt with things differently than he did. And Payton's also got these papers now, so he's the one that's real official.
I got the papers.
He got the papers. He's the one that's real official here.
But them papers really don't mean nothing.
And so we want to give a voice and help to those who have gone through things in their life, who have gone through trauma, gone through, and not just Black people, but anybody who's willing to listen to this podcast. If you've ever been through anything in your life and you just feel lost, you feel like you don't have an identity, you feel like you don't know where you belong, or if you have been and you feel like you're stuck in the same loop, you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over. The goal for us here is to share our experiences and teach our community and anybody who's willing to listen about mental health. Fact is, when you break your arm, you go to the doctor, right? You got a heart, you got problems with your heart or your lungs, you get surgery. But nobody in our community talks about what happens when your brain gets damaged. Not like you get a concussion or somebody hits you in your head. What happens when experience damages your brain? You think that people in the military who got PTSD got it for nothing? No. You can damage the brain. You can shatter the mind. And unless you have the right tools to fix it, you're going to be forever broken.
That's a fact. And I do want to say something too, real quick. That was really good. That was really good, bro. Because it's a fact. Like when there's something wrong with us phically, like we're quick to get that checked out. There's something wrong. Got to get this fixed, or else. I ain't breathing right. Yes. No, for real though. Like we get it fixed, but most people think when it comes to their mind, and I'm not going to take too much time because we're at the end of this, but when it comes to the mind, we don't tend to think like, okay, there's something wrong. Let me get this fixed. It's like there's something wrong. I got this. I can handle it. But what if I told you that when you feel there's something wrong on a chemical level, there truly is something going on? You see, neuroscience has developed substantially, to your point earlier when you were talking about your condition. There literally are things that are going on. There are chemicals in our brain, hormones, neurotransmitters that when we experience mental health crises or mental health issues, depression, anxiety, there's a neurotransmitter or there's a hormone that is either not firing, overfiring, or somewhere in between. And it can be explained through that. So understand that it's not, you may be able to develop tools to engage those chemicals, but if you're stuck in this pattern, this cycle, this loop, and you're like, I can figure this out on my own, chances are 9.9 times out of 10, you ain't gonna figure the shit out, and you need to tap in with our podcast, for real.
So you guys, thank you for listening to this episode. Whatever audio or video issues, we'll have all that cleaned up by the next one. But I've been your host, Brandon.
And this is Payton.
Welcome to Strength in Words, a podcast about mental health and the Black experience.
We out.